Some cases are so shocking they leave the world in disbelief. But what happens when the people at the center of these cases are just kids? Were the decisions against them truly fair, or was there more to the story? In this eye-opening video, we uncover the controversial journeys of young individuals who faced the most severe consequences for their actions. And their final words, they will haunt you forever. On July 2, 1977, after a night of drinking at several bars, 17-year-old Dalton Prejean and his 3 friends cruised through town in a 1966 Chevrolet, unaware that a split-second decision would change everything. They were stopped by State Police Officer Donald Cleveland in Lafayette Parish. It was a routine traffic stop, triggered by the car's faulty taillights. Following a heated altercation with his brother Joseph, Dalton Prejean, still fuming from the confrontation, made a shocking decision. In a sudden, impulsive act, he pulled out a .38 caliber revolver and fired at Officer Cleveland. Not once, but twice. In mere moments, the officer collapsed, and the night took a tragic turn. Dalton and his companions fled immediately, but they were arrested hours later. Dalton Prejean was convicted of Officer Cleveland's cold-blooded elimination and was sentenced to the harshest punishment in 1978. Despite multiple appeals, his mental health history and low IQ were never fully considered in the fight to change his fate. Even after years of appeals, including one to the U.S. Supreme Court in 1990, his sentence was upheld. While his actions were undeniably brutal and driven by the heat of the moment, the question remains: was the ultimate sentence for Dalton Prejean truly justified, or was there more to consider? On April 17, 1991, day before his sentence would be carried out, he was offered a last meal. Prejean requested a seafood platter and an orange soda. The next day, Dalton Prejean took his last breath in the electric chair at Louisiana State Penitentiary in Angola. 24 family members of Officer Cleveland were present in the witness room. And his final words? "Nothing will be accomplished. I am at peace with myself. I would like to thank everyone who has supported me through all these years. I would also like to thank my loved ones for being strong. My son will be a better person by not letting something like this ruin his life. Stay strong, keep fighting, keep praying. They said it wasn't about revenge, but it's hard for me to see it that way, to understand it. I hope they find happiness. So, I give up my life. I send my love to everyone. God bless you all." Dalton was gone at 9:14 p.m. His final words raise a difficult question. Would a life sentence have been a more just outcome? Rather than pure remorse, his tone carried a deep resentment toward the system. While you wonder if Dalton's trial could have seen a different verdict if it was to be held in 2025, let's move on to the next case that will make you even more uncomfortable. Johnny Frank Garrett was just 17 years old when he forced himself on a 76-year-old nun named Tadia Benz in 1981. His neighbor, Sister Tadia, lived in a convent near Garrett's home. On the morning of October 31st, Garrett did the unthinkable. Unprovoked, he entered the convent, violated her, and put a brutal end to the innocent old woman's life. She did nothing wrong to deserve her merciless fate. Then why did he commit such horrible acts against this noble woman? Garrett was arrested on November 9, 1981. On examination by Dr. Dorothy Atno Lewis, it was determined that Garrett was suffering from multiple personality disorder due to abuse suffered during his childhood. This wouldn't excuse the inappropriate acts of brutality that were conducted on the poor woman. He was clearly mentally unfit after the examination and was rendered dangerous to the society. Garrett was arrested and charged for his inhuman acts. His trial ended in capital punishment. His punishment was all set to happen on January 6, 1992, but the intervention of Pope John Paul II led to a temporary reprieve by the governor. This changed the course of the case. Although he was offered a hearing to change his sentence to life imprisonment, the capital punishment was upheld. There was no hope for him. Should they have tried to rehabilitate him, treat him, and then decide if capital punishment was warranted? He was unalived on February 11, 1992, at the age of 28, by lethal injection at the Huntsville unit in Texas. One day before his sentence, he was offered a last meal. Garrett requested strawberry and chocolate ice cream. When asked for his last words, Garrett said, "I would like to thank my family for loving me and taking care of me. The rest of the world can kiss my ever-loving ass." Even in his last words, Garrett was cold and remorseless. He didn't show any guilt or ask for forgiveness for what he had done. He was announced gone at 6:10 p.m. Did his mental illness cause him to be so remorseless? Like almost all capital punishment cases, this one also leaves many questions unanswered. But the next case with its own set of spine-chilling moments. On April 4, 1975, 17-year-old Charles Rumbaugh shot and unalived the owner of a jewelry store in Amarillo, Michael Fillo, 58, during a burglary. A few days before the jewelry store burglary, Rumbaugh had already used 2 firearms to loot a motel in San Angelo, taking $350. From an early age, Rumbaugh had a history of criminal behavior, and he had been involved in many petty, unlawful acts too. However, this heinous act changed everything. This was the end of it all. Rumbaugh was arrested and charged with capital unaliving, and in his April 1976 trial, he got what everyone dreads, the capital punishment. At the conclusion of the hearing, in a bizarre incident, Charles Rumbaugh was trying to force the United States Marshal to end him in the courtroom. Despite the presence of psychiatrists in the court to comment on his mental state, the district judge found that Charles Rumbaugh has a realistic understanding of his present position and of the choices available to him, and that he is mentally competent to make a rational choice with respect to continuing or abandoning further litigation. Rumbaugh's parents filed an appeal to consider his competence based on a mental health assessment, but that didn't change his fate. Why didn't nothing word in his favor, despite visible signs of mental instability? Turns out, Rumbaugh showed no remorse. In fact, even his imprisonment and capital punishment weren't enough to make him regret his actions. During his time in prison, Rumbaugh escaped from the Potter County Jail with 2 other inmates in December 1975, but his escape plan wasn't perfect enough and he was recaptured shortly after. On September 11, 1985, Charles Rumbaugh's fate was sealed in Texas. Yet, in an unusual choice, he turned down the offer of a final meal the day before. Was it defiance, acceptance, or something else entirely? Considering his criminal history and notorious ways, Rumbaugh's final words were more philosophical and sarcastic than anyone would have imagined. DJ, Lori, Dr. Wheat, all I can say is goodbye, and to the rest of you, although you may not forgive my transgressions, I forgive yours against me. I am ready to begin my journey, and that is all I have to say. Did the judge do the right thing here? Was he given a fair trial? Guess we'll never know. But in the next one on this list, there's something that will make you stop in your tracks and think. On August 1st, 1990, a horrific scene was discovered by a customer who entered Wilkin Dry Cleaners in Conroe, Texas. The lifeless body of employee Lita Wilkerson was found, lying face up on the floor. She had been shot once in the face and thrice in the back. Looking for clues wasn't difficult because on the counter, a stack of jeans with the name McGinnis written on the pockets was found, and $140 was missing from the cash register. It was a clear case of theft and unaliving. The victim's van was missing from the parking lot, and 2 witnesses identified McGinnis as near the scene earlier. The van was abandoned nearby, and was recovered by the authorities the same day. Inside the van was Wilkerson's wallet, on which McGinnis's fingerprint was found. 3 more witnesses emerged. They were employees from a nearby shopping center who identified McGinnis as asking for assistance after the van had broken down earlier in the day. The next day, McGinnis, a man of African-American descent, was traced and arrested at his aunt's house near the dry cleaners. In his possession were $15 and a .25 caliber pistol, which turned out to be the main weapon. The trial was simple, and the verdict came easy, as there was solid evidence against McGinnis. On October 8, 1990, McGinnis was charged with the unaliving of Lita Wilkerson while committing a theft and was sentenced to capital punishment on July 30, 1992. He appealed and tried to overturn the capital punishment, but in vain. His case was taken up by Amnesty International and the Pope, but to no avail. His appeal was denied by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in 1994. On January 25, 2000, McGinnis faced the ultimate sentence in Texas, but his reaction was unexpected. So disheartened by the verdict, he refused to say any final words or even request a last meal, leaving many to wonder what was truly on his mind in those final moments. Why was he quiet? Prior to this, McGinnis had a history of petty, unlawful acts. While there's no discounting the fact that he took someone's life, in the court of law, there have been much worse brutalities that have received a life sentence and not capital punishment. It makes one wonder why certain violators have to face the harsher punishment, and the next case is the perfect example of that. On the night of November 3, 1990, in a small town in Virginia, 17-year-old Douglas Christopher Thomas and 14-year-old Jessica Wiseman made a decision that would change their lives forever. They were young and in love, but Jessica's parents, Kathy and James Wiseman, didn't approve. They pressured Jessica to end things, but she refused. Instead, in a moment of anger and desperation, she and Thomas came up with a horrifying plan that nobody could have fathomed. With a heavy firearm in hand, Thomas made his way to the Wiseman house. Jessica, determined to be with him no matter what, helped him get inside through a window. Once inside, Thomas raised the gun and fired. James Wiseman was unalived instantly. Kathy, wounded but still alive, lay there in pain. That's when Jessica, without hesitation, told Thomas to finish the job. And he did. With one more attempt, Kathy was gone. Thomas was arrested soon after and quickly confessed. At his trial, the judges decided he deserved the capital punishment. His lawyers tried to move the trial, arguing that media attention made it impossible for him to get a fair case, but the request was denied. Meanwhile, Jessica, even though she helped plan the brutal acts, was tried as a minor. She was sentenced to just 7 years in prison and walked free when she turned 21. But was this really justice? Thomas pulled the trigger, but Jessica helped plan it. So why was she given just 7 years, while he faced the harshest possible outcome? The night before his elimination, Thomas was given his last meal, fried chicken. He had no official last words, but just days before, in a news interview, he said, "It overwhelms me that Jessica only got 7 years and is free to resume her normal life, while I'm 4 days away from paying the ultimate price for something we both participated in. I made the wrong decision, so I can't be mad at anyone but myself. But I don't think America should execute juvenile offenders. That basically means saying we have no chance at rehabilitation." On January 10, 2000, Douglas Christopher Thomas was eliminated by lethal injection at Greensville Correctional Center in Virginia. Should a 17-year-old really be seen as beyond saving if a 14-year-old who was also an ally in the unlawful act received a much lesser sentence? The next one on this list might make you question the entire legal process. In November 1984, in San Antonio, Texas, teenagers Ruben Cantu and his friend David Garza broke into a house under construction, planning a theft. Inside, they found two men, Pedro Gomez and Juan Moreno. What was supposed to be a regular burglary quickly turned heinous, resulting in the unaliving of Gomez, who was shot, while Moreno was badly injured but managed to survive. After the attack, the two teenagers fled. At first, Moreno did not identify Cantu as one of the offenders, but later, he changed his statement saying Cantu was the one who pulled the trigger. That testimony sealed Cantu's fate. He was convicted of first-degree unaliving and received capital punishment. But as years passed, doubts about his guilt started to grow. Even the district attorney who prosecuted him, Sam Millsap, later admitted he might have made a mistake. He publicly questioned whether Cantu was actually guilty. Despite these concerns, the courts upheld the conviction. The night before he was set to be unalived, Cantu was given the chance to request a last meal. He asked for chewing gum, but it was denied. In the early hours of August 24, 1993, 26-year-old Ruben Cantu faced his final moments. When given the chance to speak, he offered only 2 words. "No, sir." Just 7 minutes later, at 12:29 a.m., his story came to an irreversible end. Years later, both Moreno and Garza took back their original statements saying Cantu wasn't the real offender. Moreno even pointed out that the shooter had very curly hair, something Cantu didn't have. This revelation caused an uproar. In 2007, Judge Reed reviewed the case again and declared that Texas had eliminated the right man. But critics weren't convinced. They pointed out that Reed was the same judge who denied Cantu's appeal in 1988 and signed off on his elimination date in 1993. So, was Ruben Cantu truly guilty? Or did Texas put an innocent man to an end? If a man can be unalived based on shaky testimony that later changes, how many others have suffered the same fate? A similar but perhaps more shocking fate came up on the next offender. On June 6, 1995, 17-year-old Toronto Patterson arrived at his great-aunt's house, looking for a BMW. Inside the house was 25-year-old Kimberly Brewer, who welcomed him in. But what started as a casual visit quickly turned into a nightmare. Patterson later returned, this time with a .38 caliber revolver. In the living room, he used his firearm on Kimberly. But he didn't stop there. Also in the house were 2 little girls, 3-year-old Ollie Brown and 6-year-old Jennifer Brown. Patterson opened fire again, targeting both children before continuing his rampage. After the brutal offense, Patterson stole 3 of the 4 wheels from the BMW, loaded them into his grandmother's car, and left. He later tried to sell them but failed. That same day, police arrested him and found small bloodstains on his clothes. At first, he denied everything, but eventually he confessed. Under Texas law, cases involving young victims were considered among the most serious. Patterson faced the highest level of sentencing for his role in Ollie Brown's fate. On November 20th, 1995, his future was sealed by the justice system. The night before his elimination, Patterson received his last meal: 6 pieces of crispy fried chicken, 4 jalapenos, 4 buttermilk biscuits with butter, a chef's salad with bacon bits, black olives, ham, and Italian dressing, 6 Sprites, and white cake with white icing. That was quite an elaborate last meal, but his last words were quite disturbing, leaving many questions unanswered. On August 28, 2002, at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas, Toronto Patterson was strapped to the gurney for his lethal injection. Before the procedure, he spoke his final words. "I'm sorry for the pain. I'm sorry for what I caused my friends, family, and loved ones. I feel a great responsibility and guilt for what happened. I should be punished for the crime, but I don't think I should die for a crime I didn't commit." At 6:17 p.m., Toronto Patterson was pronounced gone. Was he telling the truth? Why did he say he was being punished for an offense he didn't commit? But the next offender's last words will make you think hard about capital punishment for minors. On April 19, 1994, 17-year-old Napoleon Beasley and his friends, Cedric and Donald Coleman, set out with one goal: to steal a Mercedes-Benz. They waited outside the home of 63-year-old businessman John Luddig, watching as he pulled into his garage. The moment he stepped out of the car, Beasley approached and shot him, unaliving him instantly. But Beasley wasn't finished. He turned the gun on Luddig's wife and pulled the trigger. Miraculously, the gun malfunctioned. Thinking quickly, she dropped to the ground and pretended to be gone. Believing he had finished the job, Beasley and his accomplices sped off in the stolen car. It didn't take long for police to track them down. Beasley was arrested soon after. In court, the Coleman brothers testified against him in exchange for lighter sentences. They each received 40 years in prison. But Beasley, the one who pulled the trigger, was sentenced to capital punishment. His appeals dragged on for years, but every last one was denied. The night before his end, he was given the option to request a final meal. He made no special requests. On May 28, 2002, at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas, Napoleon Beasley was led to the elimination chamber. Before receiving his lethal injection, he gave his final words. "The act I committed that put me here was not just heinous, it was senseless. But the person who committed that act is no longer here. I am. I'm sorry for what's happening here tonight, not just for me, but for what's happening to me. I'm disappointed that a system that is supposed to protect and uphold what is just and right can be so much like me when I made the same shameful mistake." At 12:25 a.m., Napoleon Beasley was pronounced gone. His case reignited the debate over whether juveniles should ever face the ultimate sentence. Did Beasley deserve this fate for something he did as a teenager, someone who may have changed over time? His final words leave behind unsettling questions that still linger today. In 1979, 17-year-old J. Kelly Pinkerton broke into the home of Sarah Dawn Lawrence in Amarillo, Texas, planning to steal from her. But the burglary quickly turned into a heinous act. He offended her viciously, hitting her multiple times before leaving her unalive. This time, he got away with it. A year later, in 1980, he struck again. This time, the affected individual was 25-year-old Cher Welge, a furniture store employee. He eliminated her. Finally, Pinkerton's senseless rampage came to an end in 1981, and he was arrested. After a long investigation, he was found guilty of both offenses. In 2 separate trials, the jury sentenced him to capital punishment. For nearly 7 years, he sat on, waited for his turn, filing appeal after appeal, desperately hoping for a change in his verdict. But every request for mercy was denied. His elimination was scheduled for 1986. The night before he was set to die, Pinkerton was given his last meal. He requested 2 cheeseburgers with fries, onions, lettuce, tomatoes, pickles, ketchup, mustard, and mayonnaise, along with a cola. On May 15, 1986, J. Kelly Pinkerton was led to the elimination at the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas. He became the 16th person to be unalived in the United States after the capital punishment was reinstated in 1976. His father, Gene Pinkerton, was the only family member present, gripping a railing as he watched his son take his final breaths. When asked if he had any last words, Pinkerton spoke directly to his father. "Be strong for me. I want you to know that I'm at peace with myself and with my God. I talked to everyone on the phone. I got to talk to Mom, tell Mom goodbye, keep your spirits up for me." Then in his final moments, he began to sing, "I bear witness to Allah. I ask for your forgiveness." As the lethal injection took effect, his last words were, "I feel dizzy. I feel dizzy." At 12:25 a.m., J. Kelly Pinkerton was pronounced gone. His elimination marked another chapter in America's long and controversial history with capital punishment. Some saw him as a cruel offender who got what he deserved. Others questioned whether an offense committed as a teen should seal a person's fate forever. But no matter what, 2 innocent women lost their lives, and nothing could change that.